technological innovation is actually driven not by competition whatsoever. On the other side of the spectrum, it's very, very clear at this point that technological innovation is now currently being hindered by the market system and the values and the processes therein, with the need for scarcity, with the need to maintain establishments. We have such profound technology today sitting on the sidelines that it will not come to fruition because it will override existing establishments, and it is simply not profitable to create the type of sustainability that these new technological advents create. So 3 points. A, the greatest contributors to scientific innovation have not done it for money, and you can research that thoroughly. B, psychological motivation is not driven by competition for creative invention. And C, right now we live in a state of social evolution within market theory that is actually hindering technological process because of the very dynamics of the system itself. Monetary economics exists in the same form it has always existed, as nothing but a religion. It's based on closed presuppositions which are essentially immutable in the eyes of those who practice it. Going back to Adam Smith and the, quote, invisible hand. What the hell is that? The invisible hand? That's it? I mean, you got to be kidding. Is there any way to test this invisible hand? No, not at all. And it's a presupposition of some type of monetary god, and it's absolutely insane. It operates with circular reasoning in a closed kind of mind lock, just like any other religion. And it's absolute blasphemy, of course, when you choose to articulate anything out of the presuppositions of that belief system. Now, please note that I don't mean to be insulting towards those minds I mentioned, Ludwig von Mises, Hayek, Friedman. They're very brilliant individuals within the confines of the variables they choose to acknowledge. Just like there can be very brilliant individuals within any religion within the confines of the philosophy that they choose to accept while they blinker out everything else. But the bias is so transparent. I have a book by Ludwig von Mises called The Anti-Capitalistic Mentality. Now, just the name of that just reeks of outrageous presupposition and arrogance, does it not? The very statement, the anti-capitalistic mentality, presupposes that anyone who is against the capitalist system or the market system must be of a particular form of preconditioned mentality. And therefore, any objective and tangible open conversation is immediately void because it's just a mentality. If that isn't religious stigma, I don't know what is. Now, I want to be clear here because if you read the Mises work and the defense of the capitalist system by many works, by many different economists, they actually support it very, very well within the confines of the arguments that they choose to recognize. I want to clearly point out that the Zeitgeist movement and the resource-based economy, what our angles are, what our problems are in fact very, very different from any other objections to the economic theories put forward. While there are certainly overlaps, ours is explicitly different, and I have yet to hear any economic rebuke of anything we say that isn't simply a projection of earlier arguments which they feel have already been previously debunked. It is nothing more than a religion, and I want to make sure everyone thoroughly understands that. And when you approach people that believe in these ideas, you have to understand that very often your logic will be cut off because they will blinker out information in their own schemata, whether they're even conscious of it or not. That's the power of belief. And unfortunately, some people really will never understand rational associations because of their prior conditioning in life, but that's for another conversation. Okay, that's enough of that. I apologize for that tangent. Let me get back on track here and talk about a resource-based economy, because once you understand the ground-up approach of a resource-based economy, it immediately makes void all notions of prior economic monetary theory because it simply doesn't make any sense otherwise. The difference between monetary economic theory and a resource-based economy is that we are actually taking account of what sustains life. We're actually taking account of raw materials. True economic theory can only manifest from the properties of all raw materials that exist on this planet, coupled with the processes that organize and navigate the mining, production, distribution, updating, waste recycling, and all other attributes required to maintain stasis, abundance, and hence sustainability. Now, for the sake of this discussion, I'm not going to talk about human values or human wants. I'm going to simply leave it under the arbitrary distinction of, quote, demand. And that's it, demand as an abstraction. I want to point out very clearly that it doesn't matter if we're talking about the human species or the species of cattle or vegetation. Every attribute of this model holds true in and of itself in the foundation of its logic. Obviously, though, within the human species, we have an advanced society with transportation, extensive energy requirements, so that will be taken into account under the guise of demand in a very general sense. But I want to reiterate the point that in order to understand this model, you have to remove yourself from the equation in the most direct sense. It doesn't matter what you want. If the earth can't provide it, then your needs are invalid. It's bad enough that everyone in this culture is conditioned into a value system that pushes forward a GDP-driven economic structure that requires perpetual consumption to fuel employment and to hence fuel survival of people, not only on the sustenance level. I don't mean consumption so people can go eat and they eat and consume. I mean that it requires material consumption rampantly to keep this idiotic machine going so everyone can go to their stupid jobs and they can come home with their dollar bills and then support themselves with the necessities of life. That is the driving factor that will lead to the absolute demise of this system, and that's only one segment of that detrimental cancer attribute. By the way, what I mean by stupid jobs, since I threw that in there in case that's misinterpreted, I mean that any occupation that doesn't have a direct relationship to contribution for society, I mean it doesn't actually create something tangible that it will improve people's lives. This, of course, would include advertising, Wall Street, the entire monetary enterprise, not to mention the service system, service industry, where I believe roughly 70% of all kiosk jobs, waiting jobs could easily be replaced by automation right now, not to mention it wastes people's lives to be stuck in those positions when they could be educated to actually create and to contribute to society. The majority of monetary-based labor requirements are not based on production of anything tangible for social concern. They're based merely on keeping people doing something so they can get purchasing power to keep the entire thing going. Waste of life, waste of resources, lack of contribution. Okay, the foundation of a resource-based economy is the recognition of what we could call the life ground. The life ground is a gestural distinction to refer to the attributes of human survival that are without opinion and are immutable, empirical, and cannot be challenged by cultural relativism or any competing ideology or theology. The life ground is really simple and has multiple levels, but for the first level, if we were to give it such a distinction, you have, I don't know, clean air, oxygen-rich air is required for us to survive. We have the need for clean water. The human body is about 60% water, last I checked. Human nutrition. Every human being obviously needs an ideal amount of calories, proteins, minerals, vitamins, all of which can be quantitatively assessed on average to meet balance and optimum health. The next level of this life ground has to do with social functionality, not just the individual requirements we need to survive, but what society needs to maintain itself in an optimum way. Human beings cannot survive alone. We are intrinsically social organisms. I know we often talk about how there's no human nature, but we relate this to behavior. There's a very, very real human nature on a physiological level. And one thing that's become clear in recent studies is that humans are intrinsically social. If you were born into an environment and you were fed, but you never had any form of human contact, you would die. This is an amazing realization. It goes to show that we are not islands. We are social, which means we exist, in fact, as a social organism. We cannot survive in a vacuum in the development of the human being. So society itself reflects a collective social organism in the most complete scientific sense. The manifestation of that social organism occurs in our infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, and of course what we know as industry today. The mining of materials, the process of putting them together into component attributes, the process of production of needed goods, to the efficient distribution of those goods, to the assessment of periodic demand and the change of demand, to the replacement of goods and keeping things updated, to the recycling of broken down goods after their life cycle, and the reusing of those materials in the most efficient and wasteless manner we can come up with. So the social life organism, if you will, requires that we intelligently manage every single resource on this planet in order to maintain society. We could live in a hut somewhere under a tree and just pick berries, but that's not really a social life unless you just had a small hunter-gatherer tribe. Obviously, that's not what we're doing. And obviously, in that case, you still need to manage your resources in the exact same philosophical model. So the intelligent management of the Earth's resources is priority number one to maintaining a society that wants to sustain itself. And if there's any goal that I hope we have, it's to sustain ourselves. I hope people do want to leave a good Earth for their children and their children's children, and to see the longevity of the species. And essentially what the cold empirical goal of any organism is the survival of the species and reproduction. So before I go on, I want to summarize these two brief points. The single human organism requires food, air, and water and nutrition. The social organism requires the intelligent management of all resources. Put together, very simply, we have to manage all of our resources in the most efficient way we possibly can. That is the basis of survival, and that is the basis of a resource-based economy at the very core. And as I will proceed to describe, everything is based explicitly on the preservation and intelligent management of those resources. Those two life ground issues taken into account, which is really one life ground if you think about it clearly, let's now think about the resource-based economy design. Yes, a resource-based economy is designed, centrally planned, just like an automobile is designed to work in a system. You don't take a bunch of parts and shove it into a, quote, automobile and give them free will and let them decide if they want to operate or not based on how much gain they're going to get from some other component of the car. A true system has to emerge on this planet to govern human society. There's no other choice. There's no opinion or cultural relativism to that whatsoever. We have a makeshift system. I'm going to stop there. I have a tendency to revert back into talking about the problems of the system when I'm here to really talk about what a resource-based economy design actually is. So, step one, a full survey of all planetary resources related to the life ground 1 and 2 that we just discussed. We cannot create a system of operation without understanding what we have to work with and the limitations of those attributes. These would be considered the economic variables in our economic model, or more specifically the core economic variables, because there are other variables that are processes oriented. And the matrices that are created are about the organization of these variables and how they relate to production and distribution in the most exact numerical way, meaning foreshadowing possible scarcity, depletion, efficient use of materials in a strategic way which averages out the best possible application of specific raw materials for specific production processes. In other words, and this brings me to my second point, it is the application of systems theory to the management of earthly resources. We're creating a system. It should be pretty obvious the necessity of this. How anyone could argue this, I have no idea.